Well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. Wherever here is, I think there are people probably from all over the country. If you'd like to use Q&A, chat, speak, anything, say who you are, where you're from, all that fun stuff. Certainly welcome to do that. I am Bryan Pearlman, and very glad that you joined us here today. We will go just under an hour. I probably could spend a whole semester covering things. But we won't do that, and we don't have time for that. So here we go. Thanks again for coming today. And let's roll. So just a minute or less about me. I am Bryan Pearlman. Anyone who asks me, I'll always introduce myself as an educator first. I was a teacher, a school principal, and I did work in central office. Currently a therapist. Also a keynote speaker and professional development leader. I travel all around the country. I'm an author. The two books you just saw a moment ago are the two that are out. Working on book 3 and 4. So hopefully sometime at some point those will actually be done. I am an adjunct professor. I teach Ed Psych, Maryville University here in town in St. Louis. And at the bottom you'll see my professional development logos on the left. Middle is a therapy practice, Pearlman Associates, which is stlmentalhealth.com, where I work. And then on the bottom right is a nonprofit that my wife and I and a dozen friends started. We work with a select number of schools each year for a year's worth of things to do with mental health, behavior, trauma, etc., things of all that sort. I do see some things. We have people from Australia and Georgia and all over. So welcome. I'm glad that you're here. Most importantly here, through our work and our commitment, through the different initiatives that we've done, we're on a mission to positively impact 100,000 educators, which we've achieved that. We have presented in some way, shape, or form to over 100,000 educators in the last 5 years. And through that, we believe we've impacted at least 1 million students. So probably need to update that. Bigger and better goal. If you're on Twitter, love for you to follow me. I'll follow you back. It's Dr. P_principal. You can see it right there on the left. DRP_principal. I will totally follow you back. If you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter. I think it's a great place to exchange ideas with other educators, people in medical world, mental health, and also just people in general who care about kids. Started a Facebook group. I think perhaps many of you are already a part of that. You can see the URL at the bottom, facebook.com, groups, and then Maslow before Bloom, or just go to groups and type in Maslow before Bloom. And hopefully then you'll join us. I don't remember, maybe we're about 18,000 members here from people all over the world. I'd like to continue not just sharing things from my perspective, but also have it be a type of thing where we can sort of crowdsource solutions that will benefit kids and students and that sort of thing. So I feel like there's the two commercials for tonight. Every training that I do, whether it's in person, virtual, whatever it is, I always start with how important this is. Every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. I think that that's really, really important. This, if I had been more articulate growing up, I would have said, this is my why. This is why I became an educator. This is why I work in mental health. This is why I travel the country, is really feeling about the value of each one of us, right? And what a caring adult can do to help a student, help a child, not just in school, but in life in general. Also, another very powerful quote. This is from Rita Pearson. She passed away a few years ago. She has some really powerful videos, I think even a TED Talk. And her belief is every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Again, this maybe goes to a lot of our whys, why we do what it is that we do. So I'm hoping you can see this. What initial questions do you have about stress, anxiety, depression, mental health in general? If you have any, I would say put it in the chat, but apparently that's not working. Never had that happen before. But you can use the Q&A if you'd like to share just any questions you have, and I will do my best to cover them during this training. Let's see. Oh, I can chat now. You should be able to chat now. Yay, I fixed it. Wow, it only took me 10 minutes. So any initial questions? If you have any, you can throw them in Q&A. I'll pay attention to that, but I believe the chat works now too. So please use that. We also have someone from Minnesota who commented. If you want to throw a shout out to where you are, that would be cool too. So any questions you have, please feel free to share. I'll get to them as I can. So here's an interesting one, and whether you want to use the chat or if you unmute yourself, I don't know if I'll be able to see you, or Q&A. We've got some comments here. As we're discussing the initial questions, why are kids, teens, all of us so stressed, anxious, and depressed now? So let's see. How do you know if your teen is just being a normal teen or is depressed or anxious? We'll get to that. What if we are the ones who are stressed and anxious? Yes, we are definitely not immune to this. Love to hear your thoughts on the underlying reason for anxiety. We will cover all of these. Great questions so far. I'm really impressed. All right, so just some thoughts. We'll dig into this. How are kids doing this time of year? How are you doing this time of year? Maybe these are just things to think about. We have someone from the Philippines here. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let's see. How do you make education relevant to them? Love it. These are great questions. So just thinking about it, I mean, I remember as a teacher and as a principal, it seemed like the time between Thanksgiving and Christmas, New Year were really stressful. The time between sort of spring break, map testing, and the end of school year was some ways just brutal for all of us, for the teachers, for staff, for families, for the community in general. It's just so much going on now. I work with all ages, families, couples in the therapy practice here, but it seems like a lot of the people I'm seeing right now, it's sort of preparing for transition in life, preparing from elementary to middle school, middle to high, high to college, college graduation to adulting and that sort of thing. So a lot of things that are generally stressful in general, but I think I said generally stressful in general, maybe redundant, but particularly this time of year. So asking myself and others, why are we talking about, anxiety, stress, behaviors, and mental health? And I had done the research, looked up some things to enhance this, and I just used teen as the example. But if you type in teen anxiety, and I did, in less than a second, 345 million results came. Okay, let that synthesize for a minute. 345 million results about teen anxiety. Do we think that that's a problem? Do we think that things are going on? You can even look down below, how do you help a teenager with anxiety? What are signs of anxiety? How can I help my teenage girl with anxiety? How can I help my 14-year-old with anxiety? So this is a really relevant and really important thing. And I think so many right now are dealing with anxiety, also depression and other mental health concerns. I really like this. I've had this same quote forever. And psychologist here points out the average high school kid today has the same level of anxiety as the average psychiatric patient in the early 1950s. Do you think that there might be more stress, more pressure, more things that cause anxiety and depression going on now than perhaps, in the 1950s? There's obviously something going on. What is causing so much pressure? How can we help parents see the connection between overscheduled kids, students overconnected digitally, and the increased anxiety? These are all playing a part. I remember somebody I saw, and it's probably been a couple of years, where the mom said, I met with the mom briefly and then brought the daughter back. And the mom said, we're so proud of her. She's worked really hard. She's ahead on things. So we're going to allocate her 30 minutes off on her Saturday. I didn't really understand anything that the parents said and met with them both. The mom left. I just met with the child, had an old fashioned paper calendar, and there were no open blocks Monday through Sunday, not one open block at all, nothing. Right? So that might play some part of this. Okay. The idea, and I talk a lot to parents. We all want our kids to succeed. Seems like a lot of people are worried if Harvard university is looking now, and they better see the extracurriculars and things. I don't know that having 10 things going on outside of school is the right thing to do. And I'm not judging, and everyone can gauge their own beliefs and their own family. But, I think it's okay to say we're going to really focus on school and maybe one or two activities and really make that be the focus, rather than feeling like, we have to program or entertain or keep our kids busy with so many things. I think that there's still a lot of value to play, regardless what age, and unstructured time. I think that there's a lot to that. Yep, extracurricular activities with no downtime, and social media adding peer pressure. How do we get treatment support when there's so many obstacles to get treatment? It's a big question. I'll make sure that we cover that as well. Thank you for sharing. Well, we had a pandemic, right? There's impact of pandemic on children. There's 409 million results in roughly a third of a second. That's got to play a part on things, right? We know that there was anxiety and depression, trauma, and so forth before COVID. I can't imagine that this has helped anyone. And as much as we feel like we have our finger on the pulse, we have a feeling for things, we're, going by moment, it might be years before we fully see the impact of COVID on all of us. So, again, a lot has been brought up. There are a lot of articles on this, but understanding a lot of these things were going on before COVID. Here's an article from Harvard. I just said Harvard a minute ago. Snapshot of pandemic's mental health impact on children. It's a lot here, and you can read this at your leisure. I'll have the link for this, and then also I'll post the link for not just the PowerPoint, but for the video whenever, sometime tonight or tomorrow. So nearly 1 in 3 of all adolescents aged 13 to 18 will experience an anxiety disorder. I think that is old data. The thing on the right says, according to 2010 report, roughly 50% of US adolescents met criteria for a mental health disorder. That's pre-COVID. That doesn't include trauma, and a lot has happened in the last 13 years. I think when you factor in trauma, anxiety, mental health in general, it's pretty much everybody walking in the building is dealing with something. And if we're not, as a school or a district or community, addressing these things and making this on the forefront, I think we're doing a real disservice to everyone. I'm a believer in building relationship with students, and students consistently tell me that home is their reason for anxiety. Absolutely. And part of it is that each one of us can be that caring adult, and we can do what we can do in the time that we have. I mean, I see people in here who tell me it's my parents, it's home, it's that, and I see them an hour a week, and I just try to maximize that as much as I can, and helping, build strategies for them, whether it's as best as they can, having boundaries, trying to be civil and assertive, try to encourage families to have a weekly family check-in, a business of us type of check-in, even learning distress tolerance and other things, just trying to help them, get through. I'm sure there are very stressful and anxiety increasing family lives for sure. So just some behaviors you might be seeing. You don't have to share anything now, but just some things that you might be dealing with. Things like, and in the school setting, maybe even at home, defiance, disrespect, eloping, temper tantrums, disproportionate response, sort of the idea of something this little happens and the response is this big. School avoidance or refusal, lack of work completion, lack of social skills, self-harm, maybe even suicidal ideation. If there's anything else that you're seeing, whether it's in your home, your community, in your school, feel free to use the chat and share. I'd be happy to share that with others. There's a lot going on. It's really important for us to think about the emotions that can be driving negative behaviors. It can be increasing anxiety, stress, and that sort of thing. I think it's really important. Yes, another point, substance abuse and vaping. Thank you for sharing that. But I really think it's important for us to figure out, because just because we see a behavior, there could be many emotions that are driving that, or the idea of the function behind the behavior. I'm not a big believer in randomness at all. I really do believe there's an unmet need, there's an emotion, there's something going on that's driving a behavior. So at school or at home, you may see something, and at the surface, it looks like defiance. It looks like, someone's just tired or someone's being disrespectful. There could be something, and oftentimes, the majority of the times, there's something going on behind that. It's important for us to kind of become like Sherlock Holmes, and really dig behind and see what the root causes that will really help us, and so forth. Let's see. Eating foods that endorses high blood pressure is my alternative to smoking or drinking alcohol and dealing with stress. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Good information. Here's just some different things you can read at your leisure. I'm a big believer of the importance of us understanding what adrenaline does, sort of the fight, flight, and freeze. Really, really, really important for us in dealing with teens that are dealing with stress, anxiety, depression, that sort of thing. Yeah, some people are looking for adrenaline rushes. Thank you for bringing that chat item up. But here's some stress responses. Fight, flight, freeze are the major three. There are others. These are the ones I tend to focus on. You can look at someone, you can see some of the physical indications of that. This is really great. It's from Wholehearted School Counseling, and they break down things that fall under the stress response when adrenaline flows, what fight looks like, what freeze looks like. I'm sorry, fight, flight, and freeze look like. So it's really interesting. Some of these might surprise you. Again, I would read this at your leisure. I would share this with your colleagues, post it somewhere at school. If it's at home, post it on the fridge. It's great for us to sort of learn about ourselves and learn about the why behind the way we reacted the way we did. This is from Dr. Bruce Perry. I think this is really important, and it was, his writing initially was focused more on the trauma response, but it definitely impacts all of us. That when sort of that fight, flight, and freeze, we kick into that sort of that reptilian brain, the idea of a reptile. Reptile is all about survival and finding food and maybe finding a mate, right? That's it. That's reptilian brain. That's all survival. That in those moments when our adrenaline gets going and it's fight, flight, or freeze, our functional IQ can drop by 40 to 50 points. So think about that. Think about when there's an escalated student or an escalated colleague or ourselves. That's why later we might say, I don't know why I said that. I don't know why I did that. I do. I know why, because, we're in fight, flight, and freeze. Window of tolerance, we all have one of those, right? The window opens and closes. If you're at a concert, maybe you could tolerate things that happen. You're at the beach, someone inadvertently kicks sand on your stuff. It starts drizzling. Who cares? We're at the beach, right? The beach is awesome. The problem is life in general, sometimes we're here and it doesn't take much to slam that closed. And that's the fight, flight, freeze response that comes with adrenaline. The IQ drops, our ability to communicate goes away, critical thinking, problem solving, logic, reasoning all go way down. So again, really important for us as adults to recognize in ourselves, and also for us to teach this to our students and those that we work with. I mean, here's the iceberg of behaviors, what you see, and then everything, the meaning behind it is sort of the rest of it, all we're seeing, and often we just focus on the tip of the iceberg. All behaviors, communication. Like I said, I don't believe in randomness. I think there's a function behind every behavior. So some of it for us is when we see a behavior, it is communicating something to us. It might be an unfulfilled need. It might be an emotion, right? It could be adrenaline speaking to us. It could be lack of sleep or hunger or being scared. All of those things can come out in behaviors. I think it's really important as the focal point of today was on, being anxiety and depressed and those sorts of things and stressed. There are things called cognitive distortions. They're negative thoughts that we all have. Usually when we're isolated, bored, stressed, or dealing with some other big emotion, these tend to flood our brain, right? These 11 types, these flood our brain. And usually when we're in that state of mind, these negative thoughts come to us and we can't challenge them. It's very hard to do that, or we just accept them because we don't even know what's going on or why it's happening. So if you look through these, you can even for yourself say, oh yeah, I do that, or sort of, or no, I don't. Even thinking about kids in your own house or kids that you serve. So I'm just going to go through these, and then I'll kind of give you an idea of how to reduce these, help make them go away. The first one's catastrophizing. You label things as horrible and awful instead of unfortunate or disappointing. You can ask yourself if you do that. Fortune telling, you think you can predict the future. I'll never find anyone. It's always going to be this way. Black and white thinking, sort of, it's got to be this or it's not at all, right? Trying to really learn to embrace the shades of gray. Personalization is blaming yourself for things that are out of your control. Jumping to conclusions, something like, he said he can't hang out, so I guess we're not friends anymore. Trying to make that connection when it may not be there. Labeling is the type of thing where instead of saying, I just made a simple mistake, you might be like, I'm such a failure, I'm such a loser. Magnification is the idea of making mountains out of molehills. Minimization is the one where you might say, hey, I don't even care, when you really do inside, or you might say it's not a big deal when it really is to you. The idea of shoulding is like should have, could have, would have, having a judgmental attitude toward yourself, maybe even others. He shouldn't be so upset about this, or I should have been smarter. Making comparisons a big one. And I'm not bashing social media by any stretch, but I think in a lot of ways, Instagram has not done us many favors, particularly when it's body image related, because you have someone who looks at a social media influencer, and what they don't know is that the photo could be photoshopped. What they don't know is the person could have had a great deal of cosmetic surgery. What they don't know is that this person could be spending 8 hours a day in the gym. And we have, and it works both for guys and girls, but I hear a lot more through the teen girls that I'm fat or I'm ugly or I'm not in shape, and literally comparing themselves to, again, someone who could be photoshopped, someone who may have had cosmetic surgery, and someone whose full-time job is to work out. So it's really important for us to help not make comparisons to that. If you're going to compare yourself to anything, comparing ourselves to ourselves yesterday, right? Try to be 1% better every day is really important. Mental filter is the one where maybe 99 great things happened today and one small insignificant thing didn't go right, and we kind of discount the 99 and are really just focused on that one. Okay, these are all cognitive distortions. What I tell people to do is over the next week or two, pay attention when negative thoughts come to mind and keep tally marks, because you'll find that almost everybody does at least 2 or 3 of these all the time. Once we know what that is, we can start asking ourselves questions. It doesn't mean you have to ask yourself every question every time, but there are some questions that really lend themselves for each one of these distortions. Things like, how do I know if this thought is accurate? What evidence do I have? I say that all the time in therapy. Okay, good point. You said that, great. Where's the evidence to support it? Is this thought helpful? Are there other ways I could think about this situation or myself? Am I blaming myself unnecessarily? Am I making assumptions? Can I look for a shade of gray? My favorite one in here is, what would I tell a friend in a similar circumstance? Because if I give advice, but I don't take that same advice, that kind of makes us a hypocrite. And I'm going to get a big blinking neon light here that says no hypocrites allowed. Okay, so you'll have this as a resource. I think that, when we're looking at behaviors that are undesirable or things we want to reduce, I look at frequency, magnitude, and duration, right? So if we're having these anxious moments or these stressed moments or being really depressed and they're caused by these cognitive distortions, we try and look at frequency. Can we get it from, I'm thinking negative thoughts 20 times a day down to 5? That's progress, right? Or having a blow up 3 times a day down to once a day or every other day. Magnitude is, instead of it being a level 10, like a volcano's erupting, can we get it down to maybe only a level 3? Someone still gets upset, but it isn't disrupting everything around them. And then duration, instead of this thing happened, we had a major outburst and put a fork in me, I'm done for the next 3 days, maybe I can rebound after 5 minutes, get the adrenaline out, calm down, repair whatever harm was done, and actually salvage the day and be able to get, learning to occur. Here's other things they talk about to stop negative thoughts. Again, you can read this at your leisure. Some signs of mental health, of anxiety related, and all of those things. You can see there's some examples here: finding it hard to concentrate, sleep being impacted, eating being impacted, moving being impacted, big emotions, having stomach aches or feeling unwell, and so forth. You can read this again at your leisure, but really starting to see that there are physical signs often of the stress, anxiety, and other things. I ask every client when they come in, every session, tell me about your sleep. Were you able to fall asleep, stay asleep, and you wake up well rested? Talk to me about your appetite and eating. Are you eating 3 meals a day, right? Tell me about your exercise. Are you moving your body? Are you getting out and getting some vitamin D from the sunlight? Because if we're not sleeping well or not eating well, we're not moving, it can mess with our mental health. If our mental health is not doing well, it can impact our sleep, our appetite, and also our ability to do things and movement and so forth. So this just talks about, with anxiety, the importance of living in the present time. I can tell almost right away when someone comes in and does the what ifs about everything, that usually there's anxiety at play. Or if someone is just so stuck in the shoulda, coulda, woulda, and the regrets and the shame and all that stuff from the past, I also know that there's anxiety at play. We can only live in the present, right? We can learn from the past, we can plan for the future, but all I know how to do is to live in the present. I don't know how to go back in time. I'm not smart enough to make a time machine. I also don't have a crystal ball. My crystal ball's in the shop right now, so I can't predict the future. Okay, these are important things to stress in ourselves, with our colleagues, and also with our children. And when you hear them, okay, let's focus on what can we do right now? What is in our control versus what is out of our control? What's one step you can make right now? Because often you may have 50 things that need to be, okay, we can't do all of that right now. Let's triage this. Let's look for low-hanging fruit. What's one thing that we can do right now and see what we can do? And thank you for sharing that, Stacy, a 21-year-old who's always doing the what if. What if becomes the paralysis by analysis. And I will tell you, all of us have anxiety in one way, shape, or form. We work on Saturdays. My kids used to work in the office with my wife and I, and we'd go to a late lunch, early dinner after work on Saturday. And I didn't even know I was doing this. I'd be like, what if they lost our reservation? What if they put us at a bad table? What if we don't get the server we want? What if they don't have the special I like? Blah, 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 blah. My wife pulled the car and was like, oh my God, you're driving us all crazy. I didn't even know I was doing it. That's anxiety talking. So what you can do, one strategy is, if you're going to go negative, then to go neutral or go positive or go, really high level, positive way out there. And an example would be, so my way of dealing with that now is, what if there's no line? What if they give us a better table? What if the server's even better? What if the special's better? And then the ridiculously one, what if the owner comes out, sits down with us, and comps our entire meal, right? So just trying to counterbalance so it's not the paralysis by analysis. Some things to do to help with anxiety. There's some breathing exercises I'll talk about, listening to music, moving your body, doing, I mentioned breathing, taking a bath or a shower. Actually, one strategy that really works is to squeeze ice cubes. That helps get the adrenaline out. And if you have those blue gel packs, put it on your wrist, put it on the back of your neck. Okay, that all really helps. It sends a signal saying everything is okay, because the body typically heats up when there's a perceived threat. And our brain and body, when adrenaline's flowing, can't tell the difference between real and perceived threat. So I might be really anxious, really stressed about something, and I go into that sort of tunnel vision and panic response. My brain can't tell the difference between, I have a really important interview and I'm freaking out, and holy smokes, there's a lion right there about to pounce me. The response is the same. So when we see someone who's escalated like that, trying to say, young man, young woman, listen to me right now. Why aren't you answering me? Tell me this, do that. If they're in fight, flight, and freeze, and their adrenaline's jacked up, they're not hearing you anyway, right? Really looking for ways to train kids and ourselves to have a calming place, to have strategies in place to what do I need to do when I'm starting to get the adrenaline going, because we're going to get so much further once the person's calmed down. And I will say this, in the history of the world, saying calm down to anyone has never calmed anyone down before. In fact, it usually makes people really, really upset. Is ruminating in the same category? To some degree, Stacy, yes, it is. It is part of anxiety. Put your feet into warm water and a cold towel or pat on the forehead, release stress and even headaches. Rita, thank you for sharing that. I love it. Really good ideas. So just some things in your control, having all of us model, let's double down our efforts on things in our control, because things out of our control, stressed, angry, whatever about it, isn't going to change anything anyway, right? Sometimes just making that one positive step can really help. This is Hacking Happy, how to release dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin. Do more of these things. One of them is playing with a baby. For those who've had a baby or been around babies before, tell me the best scent and most relaxing scent ever isn't like the Johnson & Johnson lathered up shampoo on a baby's head. Is that not the greatest smell ever? I remember here in town, there's Waterways, a car wash I went to, and I went up to the person at the desk, some teenager, and they said, what scent do you want? I said, I want new baby head, like with the soap. And the person looked at me like I was crazy and said, we have new car and we have forest scent. Pick one of those. So I wish we could have the new baby head. Yes, and best ever with the lavender shampoo. Amen. So here's the breathing and focus exercise. This is good for both proactive, do it before you go to bed, do it when you wake up, and also for reactive. I'm noticing signs, which I'll share in a minute, that a big emotion's coming. And it's 10 deep breaths, breathe in, hold for 3, breathe out as long as you can. Wherever you are, name 9 things that you can see, on and on and on and on. Your students, your colleagues, your friends, your family can create this and change anything on here but the breathing. The breathing is important. They could say my 9 favorite athletes, my 8 favorite movies, my 7 favorite songs. The logic behind this is it is really impossible to have the adrenaline going and be in that panic mode, slow breathe and focus at the same time. Because again, when you're slow breathing and focusing, it sends a signal up to your brain saying, turn off the adrenaline, turn off the blinking red emergency light, everything is okay. In my case, Bryan is okay. So good question, Jessica. How do you get someone to do this if they're not willing? And I think some of it is modeling this, and some of it is even baby steps, and some of it, we're in Missouri. For those who are in Missouri, it's a show me state. It's show me state. So sometimes just seeing that it works, right? Or even giving options to someone, like here are 3 choices of things that you can do now, and hopefully that they will find success in doing it, or see fellow students or others finding the same success. And that's what we tend to do. We tend to follow success. If it works, we'll try it, and I've done this as a teacher, as a principal, as a therapist. Someone comes in, it's like, hey, maybe we should consider this, or let's try this. Let's just stop for a minute. Let's just do some deep breathing. I'll tell you, for those who don't like ultra sour things, so if you like it, it won't work. For those who don't like ultra sour, taking a Warhead or toxic waste candy and putting it in your mouth, in about 10 seconds, whatever is bothering you won't be, because you'll be spitting it out like, oh man, whoa. That can even help reset our server up here in our brain and send a signal that everything's okay, except, wow, that's disgusting. I don't like ultra sour. Here's signs that a big emotion's coming. So when the question was, how do we get people to do it? A good first step is get them to recognize what the big emotion, what's happening to the body, what happens when adrenaline starts flowing, start to feel dizzy, feel like crying, get a headache. They notice the breathing changing, or the heart beating faster, or sweating when it's like 40 degrees. Your palms are sweating, your forehead's sweating, clenching fist, even clenching the jaw, and so forth. Start noticing these things. And this is really proactive and preventative, because somebody could come and say, hey, can I go to the nurse? Or, hey, can I go to the water fountain? I want to splash some water. I want to get some ice, or whatever it is, and deal with this before it becomes much bigger. And it's so much easier to deal with something as it's escalating like this, rather than we're already at a level 10, because at that point, it's going to be really hard to get someone to calm back down. Here's some stress warning signs. Again, you can read this at your leisure. some different things you can do to take care of your mental health, some different ways of checking in with your students, your kids, others. Even if they don't feel like talking, you can get in the habit of having them color code, this is how I'm feeling, without making it a big deal, because sometimes it's hard to express, or we don't want to express or tell someone. Here's the idea of having them even just take an inventory of themselves. How am I feeling right now? What is going on? And different directions that they can do. These resources are great. I'll give you a link to the whole PowerPoint. And most of these are referenced where I found them, but you're welcome to use this PowerPoint. Is a good question that was asked. Difference between some positive coping skills, which you'll see on the left, versus negative coping skills. And this is a lot to do with what we're dealing with, what we see a lot in our community, what we see a lot in our practice. And again, you can read these at your leisure, just talking about coping skills, they're all different kinds, both positive and negative. So we really want to try and encourage people to work on the positive ones rather than negative. And negative ones can be everything from procrastinating, it can be substance abuse, it could be self-harm, it could be other high-risk behaviors and that sort of thing. Again, encouraging people to do some breathing or meditating or movement or listening to music or creating with art. All of these things are very effective, but trying to do those before we get to the end of our rope, and then we're like, we don't know what else to do, right? We're kind of in a bad situation. So just some different ways to talk to a child or teen about empathizing, relating, and asking. And again, you can look at this at your leisure. I just wanted to provide this so you would have it. Self-harm is a big deal now. And self-harm comes in many ways and shapes and things of that. Anything that's hurting. Self-harm is somebody gets really frustrated and they start slamming their head against the wall or punching themselves or even cutting. Cutting's becoming continuing to become a really big thing. And kids are sophisticated and kids are, smart, and they're looking for ways, if they want to feel something or if they want to distract their mind from anxiety, a negative coping skill is cutting. And they are cutting in ways that you're not going to see them. If somebody's wearing shorts and a t-shirt, they're going to cut in areas that you can't see, right? So a lot of this is having dialogue. A lot of this is really noticing as best as you can. If it's going to be a 90-degree day and your kid or student is refusing to take off their hoodie, there may be a reason for that. It's just something that we want to pay attention to and really help people, finding those really good and positive coping skills, because if not, we're going to do whatever we got to do to feel better. Okay, here's different ways, biting or pinching the skin. You see a lot of that, picking at wounds. I would say pulling here, but I don't have any. And you could see some of this here, just things to look out for. Yeah, I agree. Good point here. Live in a real quick fix society. And if there isn't a quick way to fix a problem, they don't want to work. And that goes for not just students, that goes for adults too, right? And again, if we set the expectation that it's a work in progress, that our goal is to be a little bit better, 1% better, only competing with ourselves yesterday, I think that sets a good expectation that a lot of these things will take time. And there is no magic pill. And us here in our practice, I think we're amazing, but there's no magician. There's no one person who can wave a magic wand and fix everything that ails. But, therapy is effective. Having that caring adult in your life is effective. Really, utilizing these positive coping skills or self-care really do help. And little by little, it can get to the point where it's like, I feel better now. I feel like I can handle things, better in a more positive way. So talks about why teens cut. You can read this at your leisure. Some replacement behaviors. There are even things like punching a bed or a pillow, the holding ice, going somewhere and screaming to get it out of your system. Some people, again, it's not something you would encourage if it wasn't going on, but even snapping a rubber band, we'd rather someone snap a rubber band than cut themselves. Okay, and just trying to find a relief or a way of going from not something positive and working our way up to something that is a better replacement replacement behavior. So here's some things to do if you have a teen or a child, ask your teen directly if they're engaging in this. People are like, well, my kid will lie or whatever. You'll be amazed when it comes to self-harm or even suicidal ideation. It's really, really important to just ask. Sometimes it's like they're just waiting for an end to be able to share with you. There was a public service announcement here in the United States, a campaign called Embrace the Awkward, where it's like literally asking, and it is effective. And people will tell you. The kids that I've had to bring parents back or even refer to the emergency room or to counseling or, whatever, have often been the ones where I just ask the question. And it's like, I'm so glad, later, I'm so glad you asked because I didn't know how to bring it up and I was embarrassed and felt shame. Acknowledge your teen's pain. Identify activities your teen can do when they feel the urge to hurt themselves. Take steps to change your teen's self-harming behavior. Help your teen create a list of people to talk to and be patient. And again, early identification and assistance can really help stop the self-harming. Some contact information here in St. Louis. We have behavioral health response 24/7. There's a clinician who will answer. You have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the crisis number. For those outside of the US, I know that there are resources there. I would have them available for students, for anybody. Just have them available so it's easy. Hey, if you're ever feeling this way, here's some people that you can call or something that you can do. And they really are. This says it's a suicide prevention lifeline. I can't tell you how many people that was the difference, where someone literally was on the edge of a bridge. And this is literal, a teenager, and making that call was enough to kind of talk them back and get them the help they need. And 4 or 5 years later, still alive and thriving. Just really having those resources and realizing you're not alone. And we're going to find a way to get to tomorrow and the next tomorrow. We're going to work through this and show that there are people in your corner who care and love you and all the rest of that. Now's the time, if you want to use the chat Q&A, I can field some of the questions that have already been asked. If there's anything else, I know there were questions about the cause of anxiety. I think there's always been, I think so many of us, I think if not all of us, have anxiety to some degree. There's a little bit of anxiety, which is how I remembered to get here to do this session today, how I remember to set my alarm clock and go to work every day. That's okay. I think that there is a lot of pressure. I think the world is moving so fast that for me, I'm 51 years old in 3 weeks. Okay. To me, 5 years is about like snap and it's just gone by. For our kids and teens, something happens, whether it's social, whether it's peer pressure related, whether it's something on social media, whatever it is, it just becomes such an immediate thing. And there's that, that right away, I've just got to deal with it, or I'm overwhelmed, or people are laughing at me, and really not having much distress tolerance, right? The ability to live with some level of distress and realizing that we're going to get through this, and realizing, looking at the bigger picture. And often kids are like, well, just because you're older doesn't mean, well, you're right, but I'm older. I've also been, I travel around the sun more times, and I can put things into context. And for a lot of our kids, they haven't had to do that. For a lot of our kids, they haven't really built up some skills and coping skills and strategies. And these are things that can be taught. So I know that was one of the questions. We got a thank you, quick fix. Let's see, how do we get someone to do this if they're not willing? I think we covered that. Let's see, how do we get past student one-word phrase answers? And that is listed under freeze and the fight, flight, and freeze. And some of it is really trying to ask questions that require more than a yes, no, fine, okay, or I don't know. I don't know is usually anxiety. When someone's, I don't know. And maybe they can't speak it. Maybe we come up with a way where they can write us a note or text us or email us, because sometimes it's harder to articulate, say it in words. Even certain students be able to have a feelings thing where they can just point to it, or they can color code, show you what it is that they're feeling. Let's see. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything. It's hard right now. There are resources out there. They are really being stressed and pressed to the limit. I know that there are definitely agencies and organizations that provide free or low cost therapy. I know that there are, even within psychiatrists, it's so hard to get in to see them, that, that it is a persistence thing. It is reaching out, trying to get on lists wherever you can. I tell parents, I can't find a kid or teen psychiatrist. I'm like, call 5 of them, leave a message with all of them, get on their wait list, take a cancellation. So once you're in, you'll have an appointment. I found someone here locally that will take someone 17 and then 18 and above. And for the adults now are actually getting people in within a matter of weeks, which is great, but that is going to be a hard thing. And, the big picture answer to that is encouraging more people to get into this field. But the harder part, really thinking about this is just the persistence and just trying really hard. Unfortunately, a number of our kids only get therapy fast and only get psychiatry fast when they end up in the emergency room. Some places have, like an urgent care for mental health, and there's, been mixed bag on how effective and otherwise those are. A question about so much pressure. I think there's a lot of pressure. I think we put on pressure on our kids. I mean, I remember being a kindergartner. The biggest thing I had to worry about is if they were going to run out of chocolate milk at snack time because I didn't like plain milk, right? Or that I wanted to get the green carpet square for nap time because it was more plush. And we turned out okay. I don't think there's enough play. I don't think that there's enough options and things outside of the, sort of the reading, writing, arithmetic, and that sort of thing. And I think unstructured time is okay. And I don't think every kid needs to have 10 things on their resume to get into Harvard or to get the good education they want post high school or to get the job they want. It's really, like, to me, beyond money and title and all that stuff. And I just said this to someone earlier today. I think the greatest sign of success, or the greatest thing, which is a work in progress, is finding balance, right? Balancing that. Like, I'm an achiever. Okay, but I have balance. I leave here, I'm done, right? I mean, it's kind of late here, but I'm done. I try and leave work here, and I try and encourage kids, like, we're going to work on what we can. Here's a strategy. When you have a lot of times people's anxieties fed by being overwhelmed or being a bit of a perfectionist, I tell people to schedule out and estimate and say, I'm going to spend 2 hours on this paper. When I'm done, I have to tell myself this is the best that I can do in the time allocated. Right? That's it. That's all I can do. I have people staying up till 3 a.m. to make a paper 1% better. That's a tremendous waste of time. And what impact does that have on that student the next day when they get by with 3 hours of sleep? That has to be impacting anxiety, depression, etc. So really just thinking about those things, and realizing that no one's perfect at everything. They're not. There's no such thing as perfect. Okay. Let's see. What do we have? So stressed on standardized tests. And I agree with that. We're using them for reasons that they were never intended for. The standardized tests were just supposed to show growth over time, and we're supposed to help us on a macro level see gaps in our teaching. Now there is, parents like, oh my gosh, you didn't get whatever advanced, how could you get just meets expectation? And some of that is us trying to counterbalance it. While we want them to take this seriously and is important for a school and for kids to see growth over time, that shouldn't be like you're a failure or you're a success based on one test, 1 point in time, one test. How do you convince, let's see, wait a minute, I just lost that one. How do you convince a parent of younger student that their child needs additional help? They think their behavior is typical. I mean, the hardest thing with that is just to share resources. I tried as a principal, during our parent-teacher our PTO meetings to have some mental health things, some learning component, to send this information home in our newsletters, posting it, on our social media, sending stuff out and really helping people. Because here's the thing, if you're the parent of one, how do you know if your kid's doing well with mental health or not? How do you know if they're typical or not, or atypical in certain ways? You have no other point to compare it to. So I wouldn't give up. I would just share information, and that's what we can do, and hopefully educate them in any way that we possibly can. Educators are struggling. We're not immune to this. right? We're not immune to anxiety and depression and other mental health things and trauma. I wrote my second book was Maslow before Bloom, really working on those basic human needs. And then through that, being able to get us to learn at a high level, that works for grownups too. Let's see, schools have so much disrespect happening. I feel traumatized as a teacher, also no consequence for the below the line behavior, not enough resources. I agree with that. And again, like anything that's undesirable, we got to work as a team, work together, brainstorm, share strategies, use the Maslow before Bloom Facebook group to share strategies and ask for things. Why recreate the wheel? We don't have time for that. So really saying, how did you effectively reduce, discipline and disrespect? How did you help meet the needs of your kids when, gosh, if we want to be real here, is school to fully meet the need of mental health for both the adults and also the students, you need to have like 20 times as many practitioners in your building that you have now, right? This is barely triaging. And we have absolutely amazing mental health people in the schools, between school counselors, school social workers, and everyone else who's involved with that. They're fantastic. I've met so many of them, but there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so many ways you can pull them. Unfortunately, a lot of times, they're the ones who are also doing the MAP testing and doing other things that are not direct service with kids, and that's sometimes challenging. Let's see. Self-identity is so important. So many of our kids have issues because they don't know who they are, or they have conflict between who they are and what others expect. And again, if we can be, at a minimum, if we can be someone who accepts the students for who they are, to teach them that it is okay to be different, right? I taught my own kids, I don't want them to be average or normal, whatever that is, right? I want them to be exceptional. And just even with myself, really exceptional in math, but probably through middle school was learning disabled in reading and writing. I was okay with that. And it's okay to be that way. And it's okay to have different interests in things. And sometimes it's just being, maybe someone isn't coming to us to solve their problem. Maybe they just need to vent. Maybe they just need that caring adult to hear them. Let's see. Have learning by integration and evolving ambient. Yes, some good points here. I'm sorry for time. I'm going to have to slide through this. I have looked at these. I will save them. I do appreciate it. If you're in the St. Louis area, Missouri, we are here. We help. We try to guarantee that we'll get someone in within a week. And that's probably why I'm here late most days. And my wife and our other therapist are. Contact information for the practice is here. We can see anybody in Missouri. Reach out to us. We do virtual, in person, all that. Boy, this sounds like a commercial. Here's the, again, follow me on Twitter. I'll follow you back. Here's the Maslow before Bloom Facebook group. Here is the link to today's PowerPoint. I'll also be saving the video from this once it downloads and post that all through social media. So you can find it here. It's just, you can read the URL tiny.cc/anxiety webinar 23. Again, you'll get this in the video part. And that's it. That's all I have for today. So I appreciate everyone coming. I'm going to double check, just make sure that I did not miss any questions. We got to thank you so much. You're welcome so much. For those, any one of you have anything to do with students, be it a teacher, parent, anything, a physician, a therapist, thank you for everything that you do for kids. Hopefully you have a great rest of the school year, rest of the year, and just be well. Please reach out anytime. A lot of people say that and don't mean it. I do. Please reach out. And again, thank you for everything you do. Thank you for being that caring adult. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.